Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're embarking on a fascinating deep dive. We're looking into a collection of source material from the YouTube channel Satlak Ashram. It focuses on teachings attributed to Sant Rampalji. Our mission, like always, is really to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights from these specific sources. We want to help you understand this particular spiritual perspective, without endorsing any specific view, of course, just as a guide to the material itself. You might think you're familiar with the traditional stories, the narratives about these figures, but while our sources offer a really distinctive interpretation, it might actually prompt you to see them through a completely new lens.
Yeah, what's really striking here is how these sources lay out a very specific take on human life's ultimate purpose. It's very intensely centered on spiritual devotion and, achieving salvation or moksha, but they also present a pretty critical reevaluation of many commonly held beliefs and revered figures within various spiritual traditions. They even suggest that many popular forms of worship might actually be part of something bigger, like a larger elaborate trap.
Right. So get ready to have your perspective broadened a bit because this deep dive, it's going to reveal some
Yeah.
surprising insights and a completely different framework really for understanding these spiritual journeys. Okay, so where do they start? Well, our sources begin by emphasizing the ultimate goal, human life seen as this precious gift given by the grace of the supreme being. Its purpose is devotion, leading to moksha, salvation. But here's where this perspective really diverges quite strongly. It's not just any devotion, that's key. It explicitly states that a complete Satguru, a true spiritual master, is absolutely essential. Now, this isn't just any teacher or guide we're talking about. A Satguru, in this context, has to possess Tattvagyan. That's like true fundamental knowledge. And they must be able to provide the Sampurna Bhakti Moksha Marg. That's the complete, the authentic path to salvation. And the sources claim without this, liberation is, well, simply not possible.
And what's fascinating about that claim is just the sheer weight it puts on the role of this specific true guru. It's huge. If we connect this to the bigger picture they're painting, the sources argue that without this precise guidance, true liberation is like simply not attainable. It paints a really vivid picture. We're a dedicated devotee, someone with immense faith, real sincerity. They could still be misguided if their guru doesn't fit this exact description. And that misguided path, it suggests, might inadvertently lead them into karmakon rituals, basically rather than the true path to spiritual freedom. They bring in the story of Dharmdas Ji here. It's used to illustrate the kind of profound effort a true spiritual master has to make to pull a soul out of what they metaphorically call Kal's swamp. It suggests a very active role for the Satguru, almost like an intervention.
And there's a real sense of urgency in these sources. You can feel it. It's palpable. They warn that if you don't grasp this true knowledge and what they call the grandeur of the Supreme Father now, this invaluable opportunity might just be lost. Just like, they claim, it was lost 600 years ago. It's a powerful call to action, really, urging you, the listener, to open your eyes, to abandon what it calls meaningless worldly distractions. And it emphasizes that this human life is this rare, precious chance, given for deeper understanding, not for, mere idle talk or chasing things that don't last.
Now, this is where the deep dive takes a profoundly different turn. It introduces what the sources call the trap of Kalal. Our sources present a really stark claim, and it's definitely controversial. The three gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are essentially presented as part of a larger, intricate trap, set by an entity identified as Kal. And this isn't just a metaphor, right? The sources portray Kal as this powerful, deceptive entity, almost like a cosmic trickster, who actively ensnares souls in this relentless cycle of rebirth and illusion, and with a specific purpose, to prevent them from achieving true liberation. Within this framework, it asserts, quite bluntly, that those who worship these three gods can never attain liberation because they are inadvertently participating in Kal's system.
Okay, that definitely raises a big question. How exactly does Kal manage to trap souls, especially through forms of worship many consider sacred? How does that work, according to them?
Well, the sources illustrate this using a really well-known example. Ravana. Despite ruling a Lanka of gold, possessing great powers, Ravana was devoted to Shiva, deeply devoted. Yet the sources tell us in just one moment, his rule was taken, and he fell into Kal's chains. The implication here, and it's quite profound, is that material success, even spiritual powers or a deep devotional life gained through worshiping these particular gods, it's all presented as ultimately fleeting, insufficient, unable to lead to true moksha, at least within this specific theological framework. They're described almost dismissively as meaningless talk, something that ultimately leaves no refuge from the cycle of birth and death.
Right, and they frame this information as original knowledge, even essential knowledge. something which educated people, those blessed with intellect, must use wisely to avoid falling into these practices that are, well, deemed ineffective for true liberation, according to this view. It's a strong call to look beyond what's conventionally accepted, isn't it? And really examine the foundations of spiritual practice.
Absolutely. And then our sources give us this truly unique perspective on figures like King Ambrish and King Janak. They present a series of examples meant to illustrate this relentless cycle of reincarnation within Cal's trap, even for souls often seen as great or evolved. It makes the pretty radical claim that the soul of King Ambrish, after his life, actually became King Janak, Sita's father. Now, this isn't just presented as some historical footnote. It fundamentally challenges the traditional understanding of liberation. It suggests that even these venerated figures, often seen as highly evolved, within this framework, they're still caught, still stuck in Cal's relentless system.
Wow. So it traces the soul's journey then. What happens next?
Exactly. What's really fascinating here is how the source traces this specific soul's journey. It's making a very clear point about Cal's power, you see. After King Janak, the soul, despite its merits, apparently went to heaven, only to be, and this is the phrase used, robbed by Cal upon entry. Then, according to these sources, it became Baba Nanak, working as a servant, living like hand to mouth. This huge shift, this dramatic change, is presented as Cal's severe treatment, stripping away past merits. But the narrative continues. The giver, who they identify as Kabir Sahib, tries again to show the past to his child, Baba Nanak, even engaging in debates, showing proof, apparently, to try and make Nanak believe. The underlying message seems crystal clear. Even highly revered figures, historical icons, are not exempt from Cal's cycle, not without this specific true knowledge and the intervention of the Supreme Being, as they define it.
Okay, so how does this reframe things for us, for the listener? What's the takeaway?
It's a really powerful statement about, well, the inescapable nature of this Cal's trap, as they present it. And it also highlights how, in their view, the Supreme Being continuously attempts to guide souls back to the true path, regardless of their past glories or, their current hardships. This specific retelling, it's clearly designed to challenge our perceptions of these historical figures, and ultimately the effectiveness of their devotion within this particular spiritual framework.
Definitely. And now we get into perhaps one of the most radical aspects of this material. It involves their deep dive into the Mahabharata, but with a narrative that drastically redefines the roles of Krishna and the Pandavas, portraying them as participants in what it flatly calls Kal's play.
Right, Cal's play. So how does that work? How are Krishna and the Pandavas part of this alleged play? Well, if we connect this to the broader context of these teachings, the sources claim that Kal actually orchestrated events, specifically to make Krishna appear as the supreme god. It asserts that Kal strategically created demons like Kans, Chanur, Putna, Jarasandha, and then essentially sent Krishna to kill them. This series of events, according to the sources, was an ingenious deception. It made Krishna a hero in people's eyes, which then led them to worship him, believing he was the ultimate protector. However, and this is a key point they make, the sources assert that Krishna himself ultimately died and will go to hell, implying that he too was subject to karma, bound within Kal's grand system, and therefore unable to offer true liberation.
Wow. Okay, and they don't stop there, right? They directly challenge the Bhagavad Gita.
They do. The sources don't shy away from directly challenging Krishna's teachings in the Gita. It states that Krishna told Arjuna there would be no sin in fighting the war. Yet afterwards, the Pandavas were afflicted by the sin of brother slaughter. The text then goes into the story of the failed Ashwamedha Yagya, the horse sacrifice. Yudhishthira, suffering these terrible dreams because of the sins. He was advised by Krishna to perform this elaborate ritual with all these conditions, like inviting all the great beings. But the conch shell, the sign of completion, it didn't blow after everyone ate. It was only when Sadhushanji, identified as a disciple of Kabir Sahib, arrived, and apparently he initially refused, calling them butchers. Only then did the conch finally blow. Now, this is presented as revealing Krishna's limited power, his inability to truly resolve the situation. The source even states that those were not sins, but ghost afflictions, which Krishna couldn't actually cure, implying a deeper spiritual issue beyond his capacity.
So it's really positioning Krishna as limited within this larger system. What about the Yadav's destruction? How do they explain that?
All right. The sources continue with this reinterpretation. They attribute the destruction of the 56 crore Yadavs to Durvasa Rishi's curse on Krishna's son, Pradyumna, and others for mocking him. Krishna advised them to bathe in the Prabhas Kshetra, but they ended up fighting each other, using reeds that had grown from the ground where the cursed iron pot was powdered, leading to their, mutual destruction. And even Krishna himself, it's claimed, was killed. by a hunter named Balia, described as the soul of Bali from the Treta Yuga, seeking revenge. The source quite dramatically states that Krishna died crying and regretted his actions, realizing in their narrative that he had deceived the Pandavas and Yadavas through his own limitations within Kal's system.
Goodness, that's intense. And what about the Pandavas' final journey? How does that fit into Kal's play?
Well, this definitely raises an important question about ultimate justice, according to these sources, and the severe consequences of being caught in Kal's play. The narrative depicts the Pandavas' final journey to the Himalayas as one of immense suffering, where they died by melting in the snow. And Yudhisthira, despite his reputation for righteousness, was apparently briefly sent to hell. Why? Because he spoke a lie about Ashwatthama's death to Dronacharya, even though it was a partial truth about an elephant. The source states that all the Pandavas and their mother Kunti were ultimately thrown into hell by Kal, despite Krishna being their beloved god. The message here is really stark, unflinching. Heaven in disguise as hell, it says. And these innocent souls revered for centuries simply failed in this view to recognize Kal's intricate conspiracy.
So, okay, let's try and sum up this section. How does this reinterpret these epics and figures for us? The source is essentially arguing that these huge figures, historical, spiritual figures, including Krishna himself, they were all subject to Kal's laws, Kal's illusions, which made them unable to provide true, lasting liberation. Their stories, then, within this particular framework, are presented as prime examples of Kal's elaborate and apparently very effective deception.
Exactly. But having laid out this intricate trap of Kal and its pervasive influence, our sources then shift. They move to offer the ultimate solution and the identity of the true liberator. It reveals the Satsamarth Paramatma, the truly capable supreme God, who alone, they claim, can grant moksha. And that figure is identified as Kabir Sahib, also known as Kabir God. It states that Kabir Sahib is the protector of all souls, and that he himself appeared in human form as a Satguru in Kashi.
Kabir Sahib or Kabir God. Okay, so the Supreme Being took human form.
That's the assertion. What's particularly compelling here, in their narrative, is this claim that Kabir Sahib, the Supreme Being, took on a body in this world, specifically in Kashi, not just to preach, but to personally teach the true name and the correct method of devotion. He's described as being both manifest, so visibly present, and yet secret, meaning unrecognized by many because of Kal's illusions. This really highlights the source's central claim, that this original knowledge, this essence knowledge, was deliberately hidden for a long, long time, only to be unveiled now as the genuine path to spiritual freedom.
And this true name, this path, how is it presented compared to others?
Well, the source then sharply contrasts this true name and the path revealed by Kabir Sahib with what it sees as the ineffectiveness of other spiritual paths. It's quite emphatic. It states that neither gods nor sages, nor Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, know the name that provides liberation from hell. It states that rare are those who recognize the true word, and that if a Satguru is found, then the true name resides. This is presented as the ultimate singular solution, the only way out of the endless cycle of rebirth and suffering, the only way to genuinely escape Kal's elaborate trap.
Right, and how does the story of Dharmdas Ji tie into this conclusion?
Yes, the narrative powerfully concludes with Dharmdas Ji's profound realization. It's like the culmination of the teaching. After hearing all these teachings that completely dismantle conventional understanding and reveal this new path, he tells the giver, Kabir Sahib, that he now places his head at your feet, completely trusting this newfound knowledge. He expresses his absolute conviction that only through this path will he and others achieve liberation. He even threatens, quite dramatically, to abandon all other deities and starve himself if this true guru were to leave him. So this deeply personal aha moment right there in the narrative powerfully illustrates the kind of complete surrender and conviction the sources advocate for. It cements Kabir Sahib's role within their framework as the sole true Satguru.
Okay, so this deep dive has definitely offered us a profound, and I think for many, a very challenging reinterpretation of spiritual history, of commonly held beliefs, all from the specific perspective of these sources, of course. We've explored this intricate idea of Kal's trap. We've seen how familiar, really revered figures like Krishna and the Pandavas are completely reframed within this compelling narrative. And we've discovered the core message about the absolutely essential role of a true Satguru for achieving liberation, according to them.
Yeah, if we connect this to the broader landscape of spiritual thought, what this deep dive really shows us is how different traditions offer incredibly diverse and often, radically conflicting interpretations of our shared human quest for meaning, for salvation. It really highlights the importance, I think, of critically examining the foundations of belief and recognizing that multiple, sometimes starkly different narratives exist for the same stories, the same figures. And this raises a really important question, doesn't it, for you, the listener? In a world with such a vast array of information, so many proposed paths, how do you discern what resonates, what rings true for you, and what implications do these profoundly different perspectives have for your own understanding of purpose and liberation?
It really is a lot to ponder, isn't it? As you reflect on this unique perspective, maybe consider how understanding these alternative narratives, how it can deepen your appreciation for the sheer complexity of spiritual thought. What new questions does this deep dive spark for you about the nature of devotion, maybe, the path to liberation, or even just the stories we hold sacred? Lots to think about.